Good afternoon in New York and Eastern North America. Good morning, Middle and United States Western parts. Good evening in South Sudan, Uganda, the whole region, and Africa, the Middle East, United Kingdom, Europe. And thank you, whatever time of day or night, at all corners of the world. I'm Dr. Yael Danieli, founder and director of the International Center for Multi-Generational Legacies of Trauma, ICMGLT for short. Thank you for joining today's ICMGLT's webinar, 9th in our Reparative Justice series, A Pathway to Peacebuilding and Restorative Justice in South Sudan and Regional Experiences. This International Center for Multi-Generational Legacies of Trauma webinar, as I mentioned, is 9th in ICMGLT's Reparative Justice series, this time focusing on South Sudan and related regional experiences. Survivors, justice practitioners, peacebuilders, academics, community leaders, and civil society representatives from South Sudan and Uganda and across the region will explore reparative justice as a pathway to healing, reconciliation, and sustainable peace. Panelists will explore what reparative justice means in practice for South Sudanese survivors and communities and how it can address the long-term impacts of conflict-related sexual violence, displacement, and intercommunal violence. They shall examine what forms of reparation and support survivors need for healing and recovery, the role of traditional and community-based mechanisms in complementing formal justice processes and reconciliation efforts, the importance of survivors' participation and leadership in designing reparative measures, identify practical recommendations and experiences from within the region and South Sudan. Your moderator, I am a clinical psychologist, a psychohistorian, traumatologist, and victimologist, having developed the first program to help Nazi Holocaust survivors and their children in the 1970s. I have devoted much of my career to studying, treating, writing about, and preventing lifelong and multi-generational impacts of massive trauma worldwide, to ensuring victims' rights, the rights of future generations, and to reparative justice, including in Rwanda, South Africa, several Iran. This webinar would not have happened without the generous collegiality and my decades-old cherished friendship with Mariana Getz, who made the connection, and without the rich experience and dedication of ICMGLT's advisory council member and second speaker in today's webinar, Jacqueline or Jackie Nasiwa. Today's first speaker is Counsel Amania Joseph Peter. Counsel Peter is a South Sudanese human rights lawyer and governance practitioner specializing in transitional justice, legal advocacy, gender justice, and justice sector reform. He serves as project coordinator at Legal Action Worldwide, LA Law, managing director of Pinnacle Attorneys, and Director of Academics and Training at Remy Hughes College of Professional Legal English Training. His work focuses on advancing the rule of law accountability, and access to justice in South Sudan. Today's organizer of this important panel and second speaker is Jacqueline Nasiwa. Jackie is the founder and executive director of the Center for Governance, Peace and Justice, a nonprofit advancing human rights, civic engagement, and inclusive governance in South Sudan. She holds a Bachelor of Laws and Master's in International Law and trained in peace negotiations. A committed civil rights activist and PILPG Senior Peace Fellow, she promotes women's leadership, transitional justice, and legal empowerment. She has briefed the United Nations Security Council, supported national reform processes, and is a recipient of major human rights and women's rights defenders awards. Third is Malala John Moiwok. Malala is a South Sudanese protection practitioner with over 7 years of experience working with survivors of conflict-related sexual violence, CRSV, women, and conflict-affected communities. She is the coordinator of the South Sudanese Survivors Network and serves as an assistant GBV protection counselor with the Young Women's Christian Association in South Sudan. Malala is a strong advocate for survivor-centered approach to transitional justice and peace building, with extensive experience in survivors advocacy, protection, programming, community engagement, and advancing the rights, dignity, and recovery of conflict-affected communities in South Sudan. Last but not least, today is Francis Nono. Francis is a transitional justice and peace-building practitioner with over 18 years of experience in post-conflict settings in Uganda and internationally. He is the founder and director of the African Center for Peace and Conflict Memory and serves on the African Union Commission's roster of transitional justice experts. His work focuses on reparations, survivor-centered justice, and community-led peace building, including support to the Juba peace process between the government of Uganda and the Lord's Resistance Army, or LRA. Within an hour after the conclusion of the webinar, you will receive the recording. We have an hour and a half for the webinar, though we've been known for a most engaged audience who keeps us a bit longer. Each of our presenters will speak for around 8 minutes. Following an interchange among the panelists, I will open the floor to questions or brief comments from the virtual audience. I will then invite our panelists to conclude today's webinar with their last words. Please use the Q&A or chat functions, and we will do our best to respond to as many questions and brief comments as we can. Feel free to direct your questions to a particular panelist or to the full panel. I now have the delightful honor of welcoming our first speaker, Council Amania Joseph Peter. Amania, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Yel, for this. And thank you, my colleague, for sharing this platform with me to discuss reparative justice in South Sudan. Before we discuss what reparative justice in South Sudan, we need to look exactly and give a background of what it means. Well, looking at reparative justice, it is beyond just an ordinary accountability or transitional justice processes. It looks at broader aspect of what harms has been caused, to whom has it been caused. And that is a factual definition when it comes to reparation, because you're looking at how do we repair a damaged society from historical wounds, and how do we restore dignity and preventing recurrence of conflict. Giving you a bit of background of South Sudan and how it came about. South Sudan is a country that just got independent. The country may be new, but the wounds that have been carried are never new. These wounds have been carried from 1955 until to date. So there have been recurrence of conflict from 1955 to 1972. And from 1972, another conflict in 1983. And from 1983 until 2005. So you can see that decades have been spent on conflict. And these wounds have never been repaired. And therefore, we moved on from the old Sudan to a new South Sudan, an independent country, with these painful wounds. And these wounds are not ordinary wounds. They have caused a lot of harms in the communities. Okay. And to repair them need commitment. Therefore, reparative justice is not a charity. It is a recognition that harm was done, dignity was violated, and repair is on. Therefore, all institutions responsible, whether it be government, this is something you have to look back. Why are we having generation of wars? From time to time and again, 10 years on, people go back to war. After 10 years, people go back to war. Generations have never experienced a total peace, a peace of like, let's say 10 years, 20 years. It has never been there. So it has been conflict throughout. Could it be a temporary cause, or could it be because the wounds were not healed? So that is an important aspect, that as people look at issues to do with transitional justice, let's not forget that it is about repairing the past. And repairing the past is not necessarily, let's say, for instance, accountability. Does the accountability alone repair a community that has been wounded with history of conflict? Does compensation alone repair a community that has been destroyed by the conflict? Does reconciliation help in repairing the communities? So we have to look back at how do we deal with these historical injustices that the people of South Sudan have gone through. And you ask yourself, what does repair look like? We talk of restitutions, okay? Return land property, return cattle of people which were stolen, restore identity of people who feel like they have been completely under dignified, family linked, which have been lost. As I'm talking to you today, there are people in South Sudan who completely don't know where their origin come from, where their parents come from, because completely they've lost this link. And therefore, do we rush into resolving issues through the mechanism established without necessarily identify this link, so that we'll be able to support people to connect? And thanks be to institutions like International Committee of Red Cross that does that a lot. But how do we own it as a local, how do we own it as people of South Sudan? How do we own it as the government of South Sudan? And issues of compensation. How does compensation work? Do we have to give individual money? Do we have to? That itself needs a deeper conversation. And that is where South Sudan has to look at. And in terms of rehabilitations, people are psychologically disturbed. People are physically destroyed. People are mentally destroyed. How do we repair this kind of people? How do we repair a generation that have been mentally destroyed from 1955 to date? How do we fix this? How do we deal with a secondary trauma, inherited trauma that young people have inherited from their parents, from their grandparents, all this generation wide? So these are some specific issues. And how do we measure the satisfaction of people that indeed this is the way to go? This is how far we have come, and I believe we're on the right path. So this itself is how repairing a destroyed generation in South Sudan should look like. We shouldn't rush into a one solution solve it all, but we need to look at a broader aspect of how do we repair the damage that is caused. As the question comes, was it only 20,000? 2016 that has destroyed South Sudan, or was it the 1980s, sorry, interruption from a call. Yeah, so these are some of the things that we need to look at. Then the aspect of punitive justice. How does punitive justice comes into a repair? How do we use punitive justice to repair? Of course, definitely, we cannot ignore that there were some serious crimes committed, including conflict-related sexual violence committed by individuals or because of negligence of armed commanders who are in the front line. And therefore, how do we hold these perpetrators accountable? And does it mean if we hold these perpetrators accountable, for instance, we try perpetrators for CSRV violations, for mass killing, for torture, for disappearance of people, does it repair the victim? Does it repair the survivors? So these are things that we need to look at a broader perspective. And that could be a necessity that people need to look at. Then how do we deal with layers of wounds? Of course, as I said to you, that South Sudan have come from afar from 1955 until 1983, leave alone this conventional conflict or wars or civil wars. There have been intertribal conflict. Until today, you see that there are a lot of revenge killing. There are a lot of revenge attack. Some of these revenge attacks are not to revenge of recent conflict or recent killing. Some of these revenge, if you look at them, they're historical issues. They are from 1960s, they are from 1970s, and they just wait 20 years time, 30 years time to get an appropriate time to revenge. So do we listen to our people? Do we acknowledge their pain? Do we repair and provide them services like compensation, livelihood, and memorialization initiative? We have got sight of memorialization here in South Sudan, where some of these historical injustices happen. Like, for instance, in Wau in 1965, where people were massacred in a wedding, and in Turale in Warapi State, where a number of intellectuals, including teachers, including engineers, people were murdered, and some of them were buried in mass grave. Do we recognize this? Do we remember this? Do we document? Do we still realize that this informs part of our reconciliation and repair? So these are some of the things that we need to go back 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 60 years ago to ensure that this help us achieve change. And if we look at reform, what does reform mean? Does it mean a specific institution change? Or do we have to overhaul the whole system to say, okay, this is where we need to start. This is how we need to go. We have caused ourselves harm, but this is a step that we need to start. We need to begin moving from one step to another, just like the Chinese say, 1,000 miles begin with one step. And that is where I think South Sudanese need to begin looking at. Okay. Of course, South Sudan have an opportunity to repair the damage caused. But now it is in the mechanism of the Chapter 5 of the Revitalized Peace Agreement 2018, where it allows for establishment of Commission for Truth, Reconciliation and Healing, and the Hybrid Court for South Sudan, and the Compensation and Rehabilitation Authority. These three institutions are meant to address violations from 2013 to date. The question comes here, what about the violations of the past? What about the harms we have caused each other in the past? How do we best address them? Do we think that the conflict of 2013 was just a political conflict? Does it have issues of pain and harms caused in the historical time, in the past, that made us to go to conflict in 2013? So we need to look at these facts and investigate further so that we repair our pathway to peace and reconciliation and healing. Okay, so that is the most important thing that we need to look at. So we need to, I want to ask myself a question. Repair must move from promise to practices. Okay, we shouldn't just tell people, okay, we need to repair, we need to reconcile, we need to heal. It should move from that to practice. We shouldn't just be saying, okay, I've forgiven you, you have forgiven me. But how do we practically show the people that indeed we have forgiven each other, we have reconciled? How do we dialogue to make sure that these are achievable, okay, in practice? So recognizing victims and survivors publicly, one most important thing, prioritizing urgent interim reparation for those most affected. Like now we are living here in South Sudan, there are people who are still in pain of the conflict of 2013, 2016. These people are there in the community. These people are not getting medical services. They are not getting psychosocial support. They are not getting any kind of material support. So how do we develop an emergency support for such kind of people? By identifying them as a group. For instance, the South Sudan Survivors Network. How do we identify a group of people within such institution so that we develop an emergency plan to help those who are suffering with the pain that is that they have gotten during the conflict. Prioritizing urgent interim reparation for those most affected. Fund and operationalize the Compensation and Reparation Authority and the Commission for Truth and Healing independently. Combine accountability with healing services and institutional reform. It shouldn't just be an accountability. It shouldn't just be an establishment of hybrid court, taking people to court, prosecuting them, taking them to jail. But we need to look at the broader aspect. How do we consequently, after identifying these perpetrators, go into a reconciliation pathway, go into healing pathway? So until here, I would like to say thank you very much, Dr. Yel. I would like to bring my discussion here to an end. I hope I didn't pass the 8 minutes. Thank you.
You did an amazing job of giving a comprehensive picture in such a short time. Such a sad picture too. Thank you so much. There's so much to discuss, and we'll continue. Jackie, please join us. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Yel, and also for the opportunity from the International Center for MultiGenerational Trauma. Thank you, Amanya and colleagues in the panel, and also to our participants for today's webinar. It's a pleasure always to be here to discuss about issues of reparations and victims. So, Robbie, if you can project, that would be great. Yeah. I would like to start with probably the context for South Sudan and why are we talking about reparations and the linkage between restorative justice and peace building, and hearing from survivors' perspective of what is required. So I think just to remind us about the conflict in South Sudan, and I just go to 2013 because this is where atrocity crimes and crimes against humanity happened. And in 2013, we had the political disagreements among the two leaders in South Sudan who were the key principals. That is Dr. Riek Machar, who was by then the first vice president, and then we have President Salva Kiir, who is also the leader of the SPLM. So these political disagreements terminated from a historical perspective, as Amanya has stated. We had incidences of 1991. We had incidences of 2000 before the CPA was signed, where there were these political disagreements among the SPLM as a liberation movement by then. And the fighting between Sudan and the SPLM also brought in some of the internal conflicts within the SPLM that almost tore the SPLM into fragmented groups. So because of that, those carried unhealed wounds and grievances and bitterness were carried forward to 2013. And it was just a trigger after independence that the two political giants could not agree politically, and the country went into chaos and crisis. So this conflict resulted into displacement and also crimes against humanity. And until now, there's no accountability for majority of the victims as they keep searching for justice. And impunity continue to be seen and also to be experienced among the larger population. And as you can see in some of the pictures, we have women who are the majority victims and children. And if you can go to the next slide, please. So some of the violations included conflict-related sexual violence. And I think the network members, Malala representing them, will present more about their experiences and what they have done. There's the mass killing where we have mass graves until discovered until this year, actually, along some roads in South Sudan. Torture and fear culminated in most of the communities. And actually in Bor, when I had some consultations around the transitional justice, one of the elderly persons says, if he sees, I quote, a human being from afar, he would run away. But if he sees an animal, he can stay because he may trust the animal, but not the human being, for fear that he may either be killed or he doesn't know the intentions of that human being. So this shows how victims live with fear and also with unhealed wounds and trauma. Children become majority victims. Some of them are unaccompanied minors. Some of them are children born out of CSRV, and others are just left as orphans. So these are some of the experiences that this conflict has brought to South Sudan. Next. South Sudan has signed a peace agreement in 2018, the revitalized peace agreement, and it provides for a framework for transitional justice, where three mechanisms are supposed to be operationalized. And one of the key one is the Compensation and Reparations Authority. And with this Compensation and Reparations Authority, there is currently a law which is enacted. And in that law, survivors and through the network were able also to provide their inputs together with the civil society on a survivor-centered legislation. And I could say that through the participation of survivors, especially for CSRV, this law becomes survivor-centered, and the inclusion of survivors into these mechanisms through the legal framework were realized. We have now the Commission for Truth, Healing and Reconciliation, which is also having the legal framework in place. And there was also the selection of the commissioners' processes that began, and they were interviewed in South Sudan at least, and the names are submitted to the Ministry of Justice for forward deliberations and approval by Parliament before they are appointed. So this has also been lagging behind still. And with the hybrid court, nothing is done about it. It's between the AU and the government. And I always say, like, it's like Tom and Jerry, and nobody would like to stop and take responsibility. So this is the court with the hybrid court. And institutional reforms are also still lagging behind. We are having the security sector reform. There is no unified army yet. The judicial reform process started with consultations, but the actual practicality of reforming the judiciary are yet to be seen. And also you could see like constitutional development processes and other legal frameworks are still also lagging behind. So the transitional justice framework is very important. And I think when we talk about transitional justice, there's no way we cannot talk about repairing the harm. and reparations become crucial for any transitional justice processes moving forward. Because what is justice without compensation? What is justice without healing? No matter how much you are given, if you are not healed, and then you are not going to be realizing your dignity as a person. Next. So I'll not talk much about the survivors' demand because I believe Malala is going to cover this a lot. But survivors, generally, they have a demand for accountability, and also they would like to see some prosecution going on. In one of the interviews, one of the survivors say that, why should I forgive if I don't know what the perpetrator has done? And if the perpetrator cannot acknowledge, and then there is no need for me to forgive and reconcile. So this shows the critical importance of the survivor-centered approach and also the need for accountability for survivors, regardless of whether they would like to forgive and move forward. I'll leave the rest to Malala. She will be able to cover it in her presentation, but you can have the PowerPoint. Next. So restorative justice from a survivor perspective, as Amanya has said, require also the truth-telling. Survivors are eager to tell the truth of what happened to them. And in our experience of the documentation processes, you find that when survivors start narrating what happened to them, they feel acknowledged and they feel they are healing in the process and that their pain is recognized. Survivors call for participation in the transitional justice processes, because what is transitional justice without survivors? And I always say, if I'm not a survivor and I'm participating on behalf of survivors, I'm just lying to myself because I've not experienced the pain that they went through. And I may not be able to help them heal. So it's better when survivors speak and when they are the ones in the driving seat of any transitional justice processes. However, they also have fears, and for them, a safe space becomes crucial for them. And in most of the work we do with the survivors, they keep asking for a survivors center. And in this Compensation and Reparations Authority Act, there is the provision for a victim center and a memorialization center. That means that survivors in that space can be able to share their experiences, and it becomes a space for them to heal also from the past. Next. So what did the civil society and the Survivors Network and CIGPJ do? We advocated for the survivor-centered approach and also amplifying survivor voices in policymaking. And that means survivors need to demand for their needs and their priorities. And these needs can help them to be able to overcome the past and also move forward. The other one is asking communities to support survivors, raising awareness around CSRV and also gender-based violence in conflict situations become crucial. And in every aspect, amplifying their voices at the local and at the national levels become important. I'm just leaving the rest because they have been said by the other panelists, and I believe the others can also cover them. Let's go to the next. So what are the challenges to reparations in South Sudan? One is the delay in the implementation of the peace agreement and the transitional justice process as such. And this one, I mentioned it in my beginning. Generally, there is lack of political will to move the processes forward. And actually, in some of the dialogues and discussions, you'll hear policymakers saying that why are we talking about survivors? Where are they? And if you're talking about CSRV, it's even worse. It becomes more sensitive. And it's like, don't talk about issues of sexual violence because it's not a public issue. These are private matters. And I always ask, how private is a rape, and moreover in a conflict situation, and used as a weapon of war? So the lack of political will to accept CSRV survivors and also to support them and move forward is leaving the wounds unhealed, and survivors take long to be able to overcome this. Insecurity, and I think one of the survivors say, you know, we are ready to move forward, but as long as conflict is still going on, we don't feel safe. And for transitional justice to thrive, we need to have a peaceful environment so that we are sure that what happened will not occur again in our communities or to us. People live in fear of the stigma. And actually, when you report CSRV or any GBV in the community, you are blamed. So people often blame survivors. Who took you to that area? Why do you go and collect firewood when you know the place is dangerous? And sometimes even one was saying, like, we women, you should dress well, because if you don't dress well, you are attracting men to rape you. And I'm like, how about those in the front line? Those women you go to in the community, they even don't know what dressing bad means. They are just dressed normally, going about with their own lives, and then you come there with your power and abuse them. So they blame the victims at most. And then also there's limited access to services.
Are you frozen, Jackie?
Looks like she's frozen.
Let's give it a minute. Jackie?
We can move.
Oh, here she is. Good. You're back.
Okay. Sorry, you lost me somehow. We can
Yes.
move to the next slide, please. Yeah. So these are the recommendations that I've shared. Some of them have been mentioned by Councillor Manya. I think this mostly goes to the center, Dr. Yali. At the global level, my recommendations that we may need to amplify global discussions and decision-making spaces for CSRV at the international scene. Survivor-centered and trauma-informed approach across all sessions is very important. And I think also promoting global accountability frameworks for CSRV survivors, including prosecutions and justice cooperation with other mechanisms apart from the transitional justice processes in South Sudan. We need also to advance commitments on reparations, and this should be integrated into healthcare systems, psychosocial support, and livelihood support. So this mostly, I drive it from humanitarian interventions. You find most of the humanitarian work do not include support for survivors of CSRV. So can there be a global policy that in every humanitarian interventions in conflict situations, there should be integrated support for CSRV victims so that they can be able to access those services? Also, we talked about the issues of coordination among governments and UN institutions so that there is proper documentation and also coordinated support to survivors. The last one is to translate the discussions that we are having at the center, Dr. Yali, into clear global action points and measurable commitments that we can be able to share with the UN and other international partners who are working in conflict situations on how to approach the issues of CSRV. And finally, probably long-term funding and partnerships to support initiatives such as these platforms so that it can continue to be advocating for a survivor-centered approach and also for reparations for survivors. Because I believe repairing the past is saving the future. And that means if South Sudan is to move away from this violent of acts of revenge, and then survivors need to be healing. And if survivors heal, the nation can heal and peace can be achieved. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jackie. Both of you have given a very painful, very powerful background including history. Thank you so much for that, especially for those members in the audience who have not known before. I'm very tempted to start talking about reparative justice, but I can hold back because I think Malala's voice now will teach us that more directly on the victim. Malala's voice is the victim's voice more directly. Malala, please, if you unmute, the screen is yours. Malala?
Thank you, Dr. Riali.
We hear you.
Is it my presentation is there with you? Okay.
No, we don't have the PowerPoint.
Sorry? No,
yeah,
go ahead, Malala.
Yes. I'm not going to talk about the context of South Sudan. Amanya has already touched it.
You don't need to. I think we have. Thank you.
We are talking about the reparation and justice need raised by the Survivors Network in South Sudan. I want to talk a bit about the Survivors Network. Survivors-led is founded in 2022 and officially registered in 2024. And we are presenting 3,200 survivors of CRSV across the 6 different locations within the country. And then for the survivors, we have advocates for the justice, and we lobby at the national level to influence the policies and the livelihood assistance. And then survivors are around 30 workshops plus in different locations. And also we work on the justice work with the partners like Legal Action World and Center for Inclusive Governance, Peace and Justice in South Sudan. They push survivors to access to justice. And also the impact of that, survivors in South Sudan, the network has worked within the community for the outreach, and we have 5,000 members from the community through awareness programs, and also reducing the stigma and promoting the, and then economic empowerment involved the program in the village for the survivors, saving and loan assistance. And also they are making soap and the vegetable production groups to support survivors independently. And then our partners, as I say from the beginning, it is Center for Inclusive Governance, Peace and Justice. This is the organization who stand with the network in South Sudan in the Sun movement to support survivors to come out and to speak on the behalf of others who are silent within the community and whom they did not come to talk. And then we are talking about the CRA, Compensation and Reparation Authority. The compensation is important for the survivors. And then one, we talk about the finance payment to the survivors for the physical and psychosocial and economic harm. Why we talked about it? Because there is some survivors that have lost their property during the war, and also the education. We should support also their family. And also they should have rehabilitation center where the survivors can come together and sit and discuss. And also there should be free medical support or free medical treatment for the survivors. And then also psychosocial support, counseling and trauma healing is very important because the survivors are really traumatized, seeing accident happen to them, and then the legal aids livelihood, and the vocational training center. If we have it and we support survivors, they learn something to do. It will help them also to survive in their life. And also there will be before the violence, because no recognition about the violence, what happened in their life. As Jacqueline said from the beginning, there is others asking about survivors, what happened to you and why like this. Also we have to recognize them for what happened in their life. And also we need to return the property or the land where they are applicable, because there is some survivors, their lands was taken, and also they have right their land to be given back to them. And next slide. And then access to education and employment opportunity. There is some survivors, because of the issue of the rape, they see them like they are not people who can work within the community. They cannot be given opportunity because they are survivors of CRSV. This is also what we demand in the CRA, and also should be official acknowledgement of the violence, because right now in our country, the violence is not acknowledged, because the survivors of CRSV, they are still demanding their rights, and they are still demanding access to justice. And also public apologies should happen, because we don't know what happened in 2013. From the president and the vice president, they know what happened. So now many women and girls who have been raped, and we are also calling for the public apologies for them to come and tell the public, we are sorry for what happened, even for the perpetrator who are within the community. And then telling truth through the commission for the truth, reconciliation, and healing. We have to say the truth, what happened exactly in the country, and why women were raped, and why girls were raped. And perpetrator, if they are present, they have to face the commissions to say the truth. And then memorial commemorations should happen. We should have memorial center. Up to now in South Sudan, we could not wait for the CTRA and CRA to be established. It is all the partners should support the organizations who are ready to do the memorial center, because we have lost a lot of people within the country. Women that were raped, and also we have women who are being killed within the group. We should look where we can put the mass grave, and which year also we can come together and we do memorial for the people we lost within the country. Protection for those who are responsible for the crime. They should be protected also. If you are not protected, you will face a consequence. And should be a grantee also. Yeah, the grantee of the non-resources. Because when the resources come during the reparation or the compensation and reparation, they should not put a grantee for the survivors. Should be there is a non-grantee, because when the resources come, maybe things will start changing. They will say those are survivors. No, let us do like this. We need also, they should not have a grantee for that. And security actors reform is important, and also the judiciary reforms also is important, because we have it in the country now, but we are not sure exactly what is going on as with the survivors. We should also have the strong laws. Yeah, the law will protect women's children and the vulnerable groups. We have so many children who are suffering, and also the survivors, and there is a vulnerable groups. Who will stand for them? It is the network and the other partners who will stand with them. And also for the survivors also of conflict related to sexual violence. Also, we should stand for them. The next slide. Yeah, and also we said the son's priorities on the reparation. When they are designing the reparations, yeah, we should have also son should be present, or one from the victims of the survivor should be present, the way they are designing the reparations. And also the recognition of the women's, yeah, men's, let's say especially women's and girls and children born of CRSV. Because right now in the country we are still talking about, but we need the recognition of them is still little within the country. This is what we need during the reparations. The victims, and also include urgent reparations for full transitional justice mechanism before or become fully operations. Why I said like that, we could not wait for the three mechanisms within our country. We need to go ahead and to start as a network and other partners until the two mechanism or the two law is already established. They will get us. We have gone far, because if we are waiting for them, they will not take action. Let them see the action from the partners, and also the reparation under the South Sudan Transitional Justice Framework should happen. Next slide. In 2024, the two laws was established, as we said from the beginning, CRA and CTRA, but we have chosen the Compensation and Reparation Authority is the priority and the legal basic for reparation for the victims and the grasp of the human rights committed during the conflict. Yeah, the civil society organization survivors group include SANS have highlighted the several gaps, including we have seen the gap really within the country, because the CRA and CRA, if the government have not yet started it, and we have seen the gap, it is our right to start and to go ahead with the partners who are supporting the survivors, because the survivors, they are traumatized. And when the partners start the reparation, it will make some of them to heal. When the Truth Commission be established, it is easy for them also to speak to the commissioners in a good way without fear. And also no clear provision and individual. Up to today, there is no any clear information about the CRA and CTRA, and also the recognition of the children born of CRSV also is little within the country right now, as we say. They're still doubting. It's like there is no children of CRSV, but we, the SANS, we have done with some of documentation, profilings. The survivor get accident and the child was born in which year. Also, we have all the evidence. For them, they don't have. That's why they are doubting. It's like there is no children of CRSV. But it's important because we have them with the evidence, and also the children of CRSV, we need to take really a good step for them, because now they start growing up, and we don't want them also to hear what the people are asking. Are they there? Okay, if I was raped and I have a child born of rape, why are you asking? Is it there is a child born of rape? So those children are present on the ground, and also we have them. And also there is a need of the presentation in designing and the implementation of preparation program. They should design it with the survivors. Okay, we should participate. We should see the way they want to implement. This is the way survivors need or not? Because the reparation, we don't want them to design according the way they want, because we have a network and they should involve us in this designing of the implementation. Next slide. Thank you.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much. Every affected community needs someone like you, not only with the experience and knowledge, but with the fighting spirit to tell the world what survivors need. God bless you. Thank you so much, Malala.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Francis, you have the floor now to speak about from across the border.
Exactly.
From Uganda.
Exactly.
And
thank you.
And to teach us some of what you have learned around the world, actually. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you to the panelists for the fantastic presentation. And thank you, Malala, for the journey that you've walked from being a victim, survivors, and as an activist right now. This is the journey that we all pray for. from every victim and survivors of conflict. I will bring the perspective, the regional perspective, and specifically the Ugandan perspective to this discussion. And I think the most important thing is for our brothers and sisters in South Sudan to take a thing or two from these discussions on how Uganda has been able to implement and achieve certain milestones for the transitional justice process that we've had since 2006. Robin, just for the context, just give me the map of Uganda. Yes. And could you please expand it? I think audience could see. So this is the map of Uganda in most conversations. Before I start, I would want people to look at the map of Uganda. You've seen these are all areas that have suffered conflict. So in other words, every part of Uganda has suffered conflict. So there is no one in Uganda, every area that would say we've not had any conflict in the country. During our audit documentation, we are able to document close to 127 different conflicts that has happened in Uganda. So with that, Uganda has had this dark past. Uganda has had every conflict. But of course, we know that the longest conflict that Uganda has had has been the conflict between the government of Uganda and the Lord's Resistance Army. And we also had conflict with the ADF in Kasese region. So one of the things I want my colleagues across South Sudan and audience listening that in terms of accountability and looking at justice for victims and survivors, we need to create a understanding that while the country has all gone through conflict, we are one. There is no sequences that, of course, that the LRA conflict was the most devastated conflict. There is this other part of the other region that feel, okay, I think we are the most affected in our region, but we want to build a national reconciliation where victims and survivors come together to demand for accountability on what happened. And this is one of our work that we've been doing for the last 18 years, documenting different experiences that has happened, conflict-related sexual violence, the different harms that have happened in the country. And this is one of the most important things. Victims and survivors will not find justice easily without documentation. And this, after the Juba peace process in 2006, 2007, we wanted to bring the discussions beyond Juba that, well, we don't know how many people have died during the LRA conflict. Where do we start from? We don't know how many people were massacred in other places. Where do we start from? We don't know how many survivors of sexual violence we have in this country. Where do we start from? So in 2012, we embarked on documentation of all conflict events that happened in Uganda. And I think this is the biggest lesson that our brothers and sisters in South Sudan should take if we're advocating for the victims and survivors. It is a huge task. It is not very simple. As a country in Uganda, we've not even done a half of documentations of the violations that has happened for the last 18 years. That is how difficult it is. But I mean, I think one of the ways we've taken in terms of documentation of these violations has been through victims and survivors' testimonies. We've been able to document different testimonies from different survivors of conflict that has been able to know certain magnitude of the conflict that has happened. We've been able to support victims and survivors. We've been able to create platforms. In Uganda, we created a platform in Kitgum in 2012, which was the National Memory and Peace Documentation Center, where we called upon victims and survivors of all conflict-related events to come and share their stories. Because this is one way that we look at reparative justice as a step forward. We looked at restorative justice and bringing the conversation to the limelight for people to understand what has happened in the country. We've been able to create platforms through memorial prayers. We had various massacres that happened. We had people that were, Uganda has had one of the most nasty situations where people were cooked in pots. How many people were cooked in pots at that time? We were able to bring survivors groups together, and they're able to document the testimonies as a way of helping victims and survivors achieve accountability and reparation. Alongside, as we're working in the post-conflict Uganda, one of the things we're also doing is we as a region that suffered the LRA conflict, we had a very strong traditional justice system. And traditional justice system has helped a lot in aspect of restorative justice for victims and survivors that we've had in Uganda. Our famous Matuput has actually been able to help document a lot of accountability issues. And when we, after the Juba peace process, one of the institutions that we felt was very necessary in post-conflict Uganda was the traditional institution. The cultural leaders, we knew we had a strong cultural perspective and were able to use them, build their capacity so that they could be able to help victims and survivors, restore the broken relationships that the people have had. We've had scenarios whereby where victims and survivors have confessed about killing in specific areas. Our traditional justice system has been able to work in that. So that is the context that I wanted to bring into perspective on Uganda and how we've been able to push forward. Next slide. Well, these are some of the pillars that we found it so difficult. And of course, like these are pillars that we felt would help us achieve justice for victims. Truth is actually a very difficult thing. And this is the truth. For the case of conflict in Uganda, getting the truth is not always very easy. And a situation where there's been conflict between government of Uganda and the LRA, the rebel group. Truth, who has killed me, who has raped my brother, who has murdered my sister. These are conversations that are very difficult to break through. But I mean, through documentation, creating certain testimonies that we've created in community, people have been able to open up and we're able to build stories that we're able to forward some relevant authorities into this aspect. Justice itself. Uganda was the first country that reported the situation of the LRA situation to the ICC in December 2003. And of course, you remember that the President Yoweri Museveni, alongside the prosecutors, were joined, announcing this in January. That okay, I think so justice itself has also been quite a journey for victims and survivors. But in all this, next slide. The dilemma of post-conflict TJ, reparative justice and restorative justice. This is our typical dilemma in Uganda. What are the victims entitled to? This is a very, and this is where that's where we've been bringing victims together, because we know that victims and survivors know what they want. What may be justice to me may not be justice to a victim who has gone through certain violations. So we also have like the TJ and the victor's justice. I mean, do we have to push? Malala's talked about all this. I don't want to repeat quite a lot of what she's talked about. But then also another thing in Uganda that we felt like, I mean, our South Sudan people could take into consideration who is driving transitional justice, the accountability aspect, reparative justice. You know, is it the donor? Is it, you know, the locals? You know, these are some of the conversations that we've had dilemmas in terms of the context in Uganda. And of course, this question of which transition for restorative and reparative justice. Another dilemma that we've also had, you know, our restorative justice mechanism is very strong, but again, we believe that the various criminal aspects, the next slide could probably bring what I'd planned to, next slide, please. The next slide. Yes. A tale of unfulfilled promises. You know, this beautiful picture here is our transitional justice policy, you know, which I was part of from the inception of this in 2012 to the adoption in 2019. So we had the ICC, we had the Juba Peace Agreement, we had the establishment of the ICD, that's the International Crime Division, the development of the transitional justice policy. It is on paper. We have it on paper. A very beautiful policy that looks at truth-telling, looks at justice for victims and survivors, looks at nation building, looks at amnesty, looks at reparation. So that's 5 key pillars, that very beautiful document that we've engaged. But again, we had a time frame in this document. The violations, according to government, they needed it from 2000, from 1986, that the NRM government came into power, to 2006, which, you know, after the Juba peace process. How about the violations that took place before 1986? Councillor Manya talked very nicely about that. These are some of the things these are lessons that I think our brothers in South Sudan could probably take into consideration as they're discussing the policy for South Sudan. The conviction of Dominic Ongwen, there's been a strong aspect called from cultural leaders that why reparative justice and criminal justice for Dominic Ongwen? We already have a strong cultural aspect as Acholi people that we could handle this in our situation. But there's also been discussions that, well, he can go through the criminal aspect, the criminal justice processes at the ICC, where as he's convicted and he will serve his sentence, but he will still go through the restorative justice systems in Uganda, you know? After 25 years, he will come back and he will still go through that. But that has been a bit of a pull in our context between a lot of cultural leaders. Next slide. This is the ICC. This is the trial in the Reparative. You know, in Uganda, we had the Poor Yellow. You know, these are some of the key highlights that had opened. You know, and there's also, you know, there's also been, if you read this, there's also a lot of people in northern Uganda. There's also been rumor that you better be a victim of Ongwen than Poor Yellow, because Ongwen was being tried at the ICC and the reparation package was quite clear. But while within our domestic mirror of the ICC, which is the International Crime Division, we do not have a package for reparation. So, you know, these are the dilemma that victims and survivors like, no. I think if we suffer during Yellow, but we are not going to have we don't know what reparation package is, but the ICC, you know. So these are some of the things as we go through the criminal aspect for South Sudan is something that we could also look at. Next slide. Still about the dilemma, but at least I've talked about the dilemma. Then, you know, the pledges, the development, the strategy, the circle of victims. These are some dealing with victim fatigue. The truth of the matter is the pillar of reparation is what victims want. We'll talk about everything as long as we don't repair the wounds with victims. It's the fatigue that we are battling it in Uganda at the moment. Next slide. So these are my takeaways. Political trust is too often underlooked in the operationalization of TJ. Risk and object behind the mechanism, beyond the principle, difficult to go beyond top-down approach. Useful drivers of change, civil society actors, risk of losing victims' voices, very common in Uganda. Victims and survivors who are now activists have gone quiet. If you don't give them platform, they risk. I'm happy for Malala keep on going, my sister. This is how we can achieve and be an activist for the victims who are still victims, survivors who are still survivors. I'm glad you're an activist. You've moved the step. Pull them up as activists alongside. And your network is able to do quite a lot to bring all victims and survivors through the circle. And this actually brings me to an end of an overview of the context and the transitional justice perspective in the Ugandan context. Thank you very much to all the audience, and thank you for the panelists. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Francis. Wow. For the dialogue among us. I will not immediately start with reparative justice, although you know me, that's what I want to talk about. But I was wondering whether any of you would like to comment on or to ask a question. Yeah, go ahead, Amanya, please. The floor is yours.
Yeah, I think a very important point raised by Francis in regard to documentations. Whether you're doing reparative justice, whether you're doing punitive justice, whether you're doing restitution, one thing remains common, and that is evidence of atrocities and crimes committed. And the question comes here is, what documentations if you're doing documentation, what are you doing documentation for? Criminal accountability? Are you doing documentations for compensation and reparations for the victims? Are you doing documentation for memorializations? What documentations are you doing it for? And that's a struggling question that I've worked quite a lot with various civil society in South Sudan. And you find always the voices is that accountability. Yes, accountability is very important. Prosecution is very, very important. But as Francis said, what does the victim want? The victim wants medical support. The victim wants psychosocial support. The victim wants restoration. Okay? The victim wants compensation. And that is something we have to look at that lens, is what the victim wants. And this is, I like a question raised by Celine as to what does victim center mean.
Right.
And this, in actual sense, brings you to define what victim wants, putting what victim wants first rather than what you want. What you want may be accountability, which may have a political drive behind it. And that itself takes us to a question of who is on the driving seat? The civil society? And behind the civil society, who else is behind the civil society? It becomes a political debate. It becomes a discussions where politicians begin resisting. Is it donor-driven? Is somebody paying for these voices? So if there are questions which are coming behind such, then you have to know that there's going to be a challenge. And that's why it is important to put the victim voices first, bring the victim in front, Be behind the victim. Let the victim speak for themselves. Let them, for instance, Malala is there. Let Malala be the one to speak. She knows the pain she went through. She knows the pain her colleagues went through. But if you begin speaking on their behalf, and I like the advocacy message of reason that the survivors in South Sudan said, there's nothing about survivors without survivors. Yeah, because if you want to speak about survivors, then you have to purposely put them in front, let them speak for themselves. You just support them, strengthen them, make them move forward. Okay, so that is how best sometimes you address. It should be a very holistic approach rather than having a single approach which can be politically tainted and it will not move forward. Thank you.
Very well put. Malala, Jackie, would you like to comment or to ask a question or? Jacqueline, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Yel. I think, yeah, I checked on the chat. There's a question on what is a survivor-centered approach. And I think I need to respond to that. Yeah, I know survivor-centered simply means putting the survivor in the heart of decision-making about their experiences, their needs, and their priorities, and doing that in a safe environment and respecting their dignity and also their wishes. So, as I stated, you can't speak for a survivor if you are not a survivor. Let the survivor speak and let the survivor define what is reparations for them. And I think it varies also from a survivor to a survivor. For example, you may have two CSRV survivors, but their needs and priorities are not the same. Another one may require maybe just public apology of what happened, and the other one may be demanding for justice. So taking what the survivor needs is very important. The other aspect is their safety. So ensuring survivors are not facing reprisal attacks, they are not re-stigmatized, and that where they are speaking, they feel it is safe for them to be in that environment, and also protecting them, their identity, their data, and so forth is very crucial. So, for example, if we have an event, you don't need to take the photo of the survivor. We have seen many media houses taking photos of survivors and putting it in the front of their page. So that is not a survivor-centered approach. So in simple terms, survivor-centered approach means safety and also their protection, their respect, and also acknowledging and empathizing with them, but above all, also allowing them to define what is best for them, like their best interest as survivors. Thank you.
Okay, so you already started the question and answers with the audience. We can always rely on Celine to challenge us. Thank you, Celine. I would like to, but there is another question. If we already go to the audience here in the chat, we will go to the question and answers in a minute. So George asked, it is good to allow the victims talk. However, what about the fear of retribution if they do? Is there a way to protect them if they volunteer to testify? Any one of you, please. You do know, George, and everyone, that actually protection, both physical and psychological, is the first right of victims in the ICC provisions.
Yeah, thank you.
So we acknowledge that we know that, but maybe Francis or Malala or Amania or Jackie can speak more on the ground, what does it mean to protect? Because we're not talking only in the courtroom, right? We are talking within the community. You mentioned retribution is a danger. What protection is afforded the survivors on the ground? Who would like to take that question?
Probably Dr. Yale, I can share an experience of protection of survivors. And one example was hello?
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay. One example was during a military trial that was taking place in South Sudan. And that was in a place called Yei. And in that military trial, they were looking at various crimes that were committed by the military, and it included sexual violence victims. So in that trial process, there was only one single courtroom of maybe 4 meters by 4. And the perpetrators and the victims were all attending to the same court, and there was no petitioning of victims from the perpetrators. And also, as they come to register their case, they come through the same line and they go to the military barracks. So because of that, some survivors face reprisal attacks, and that actually made them not to come back for the court trial. So that time we were monitoring the trial process, and our team on the ground informed us, and we had to make like a communication and a statement to say, like, you can't be bringing survivors to this environment and exposing them and taking photos of them. So in the next trial, they had to make separate trial processes when it is CSRV, and then the other perpetrators could not come. And also there was provision for covering of their face during the trial processes, and they could not be mixed up with the perpetrators. So protection entails a lot, and also the aspect of mental protection, during the trial process, there was no mental support for the survivors. And we also picked it up and say, during trials, there should be mental support, psychosocial support, and even after the trial, there should be still psychosocial support, because these are people who are coming to share their experiences, and they require that support throughout. So public statements also that says no survivors should be victimized from what they say is very crucial. And as I said in the others, maybe exposing them, taking their names and publishing it, or narrating like, these are the numbers of survivors brought for the court and these are their names. No, that shouldn't be happening. So these are the aspects of protection that I could talk about, but colleagues can also share some experience.
Okay, thank you. Can I also speak about protection?
Good.
Yeah,
Briefly, dear, because as I told you, our audience has so many questions and
yeah, thank you. Yeah,
go ahead.
Thank you.
Please.
Thank you. Thank you. And it's very powerful for us to protect people, victims and survivors giving testimonies. Having been involved in thousands of testimonies, I can testify that victims protection is very key in terms of, as well as confidentiality on what they share with you. And in a situation like our context in Uganda then, it also became challenging because you're speaking about both sides of the story. So will the government be comfortable with which a survivor or a victim is speaking about? There are incidences where we've written some publications and government has said, no, that is not right. But this we've got from victims and survivors because of how they remember certain stories. But we've had an archive where we've protected victims and survivors. Some of our archives have been out of the country. That, these are information of victims and survivors in this database that are not kept at the center. So these are ways in which, because in a situation whereby you don't know what will happen tomorrow about what victims and survivors, how about if you read it, especially in South Sudan, by the government on what have you been documenting about what has happened. So we need to go an extra mile in protecting the documentation and also the testimonies that we have documented. We've had stories and testimonies that government sites have been able to refute at memorial prayers that, okay, no, if a victim, because we have, one of the things is, George says, it is good for victims and survivors to talk. I agree. And that is a healing process. That is totally a healing process. It is wrong for victims and survivors not to talk. If we have these platforms whereby we've had victims coming without being invited, that they need to share their stories on what they remember. We've gone to places whereby victims have told us, no one has ever been here to talk to us about what happened in our lives. It is the first time that you've come, you've talked to us, and I think from today, we feel better as a family. These have been testimonies that has happened, and they've been able to make follow-ups, to tell more stories. And as Councillor Manya says, these are ways in which we build into aspect of reparative justice. Through these testimonies, even restorative justice is about conversation. That victims are able to speak up and tell their stories. We've had this in post-conflict northern Uganda, in Kasese, in Teso region, in central region, in Luero in Uganda, all over Uganda where we've been, we've had these conversations where victims share their story. And one of our things is to protect victims and survivors, because we are in a situation whereby we do not know what happens the next day based on their stories. So it's our duty not to expose victims and survivors. However, I can also confess that we've had victims of male sexual violence who have been raped in conflict. And we've had these documentaries. We're able to talk to them. We're able to talk to them. And this is a reality of bringing certain things to the limelight. We've had conversations with authorities. We've had conversations with civil society organizations to an extent where government decided that this is not right. Please, we don't want this documentary to be screened in the country. Hello?
Thank you, Francis. Let me read Magdalene's words, even though she should have her own voice here. But because we have, in addition to your mention in the chat, we have 6 different questions. Magdalene Amoni thanks us. And she says, having spent nearly a decade in northern Uganda, managing reintegration and psychosocial programs for LRA child soldiers, refugees, and SGBV survivors, I want to strongly echo the panel's focus on survivors-led design. Thank you, Magdalene. She says, onward, in practice, formal reparations often overlook the psychological friction inherent in post-conflict communities where former victims and former perpetrators must coexist. True reparative justice in East Africa must leverage traditional community-led psychosocial frameworks to address this multi-generational trauma of formal peace agreements will remain, or formal peace agreement will remain fragile. Thank you for elevating this regional focus. Absolutely, Magdalene, and please be in touch with me. I will put my email in the chat, because we do want to also organize, and I'm saying that to all of, as an invitation to all of you, indeed, to organize a webinar on child soldiers. So that would be very helpful. So please write to me. I will put myself in the chat in a moment. Yes, I would like indeed also Willie Stewart in the question. Roger, will you give Willie the mic? Robbie, are you there? Robbie?
Yes, he's in the chat.
Okay. Willie, would you speak, please?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Hi, thank you.
Yeah,
My name
you
is
are
Willie
asking
Stewart.
my kind of question, so go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Willie Stewart. I'm the incoming president as of July 1st of the Rotary Club of Inner Peace. And I want to thank you guys for such a powerful discussion. One thing I've been reflecting on while I've been listening is that many of these recommendations involve formal institutions, truth commissions, reparations authorities, courts, documentation, and policy, and those are all critically important. But I'm curious about something that happens after those structures are created. Where do the survivors, community members, former adversaries, and future generations actually gather to build trust over time? Have any of your organizations seen success in creating recurring community spaces where relationships, not just programs, become part of the healing process? And the reason I'm asking is because our Rotary Club has been experimenting with a relationship-centered gathering that we're calling the Global Living Room. And today's discussion just made me wonder whether informal spaces for conversation might complement formal restorative justice efforts.
Very good question. I used to ask that question of my transitional justice colleagues. Okay, so you build institutions. What about the people inside the institutions? And that's where reparative justice comes. Because reparative justice sheds light not just on the outcome of a trial, okay? Which is what traditionally is called accountability, right? So it's not just on the outcome of a trial, but it attempts to shed light on the full process before the trial, during the trial, after the trial, as you have mentioned already, and to remind everyone in the system that they are in relationship with the victim survivors. There is a long-term relationship, sometimes too long, in the justice processes. And that every moment in this relationship process has the opportunity to support the victim, to help heal the victim, to respect, to validate dignity, or to just use the victim as a witness and goodbye, or other forms of neglect, or worse, to re-traumatize the victims. And each one of us knows of such cases. So I would like, in addition to your generous offer, Willie, for opening your rooms the room we are in right now attempts to do just that. So this is wonderful. We should remain in touch indeed.
Absolutely. Sounds good.
But anyone wants to reflect further on this, because to me it's so important. It's for me, it's the heart of the matter. Please, Amanya, I'm sure your wisdom will enrich us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Willie, for this question. I think this is a very, very important question. What next after we have established all these institutions? Let's say 6 years have been given for a transition and for the operation of these formal institutions. What next? Where are the victims gonna be? Okay. Quite an experience. I've moved around several countries, including in Rwanda, where they've established what they call the peace or the reconciliation village, where you meet perpetrators, victims, sitting together. Well, other people may not agree, or I may not agree with how it is operationalized. But the question is, at what point do we bring the perpetrators together? It becomes a very complex question because in a context like South Sudan, the perpetrator comes from almost 800 kilometers away and committing a crime in a certain community. And after some time, this perpetrator, who is a soldier, goes back to their home, goes back to 800 kilometers village. At what point do we bring them together? And to some point, the victims sometimes don't know who their perpetrators are, because these perpetrators may be speaking different language, they come from a different community, and they come and commit these atrocities and they disappear. You cannot identify, and it becomes very difficult bringing perpetrators and survivors together. But in that situation, what do we do with these survivors? Okay, how do we rebuild their life after all these formal structures have done? Some of these formal structures are political structures. They're established within a period of time and they end their mandate, and that is it. But the question is, how do we deal with the consequences of the formal institution? And this has been a challenge that we've been asking ourselves, that the civil society should not look at only end goal of the formal processes, but they should look further into what about aftermath of those formal institutions. And I think that is a very important discussion. And Dr. Yell, I think is an important point that it needs more conversation and more time to discuss.
Oh, we absolutely do.
Thank you.
That's why it's a series, reparative justice series. And we have to keep asking these questions, to keep trying to clarify. Let me add some more complexity. We have a brilliant audience, I told you. So Terman Yang is saying, what's your recommendation to us as civil society working on transitional justice in South Sudan between restorative justice and traditional justice? And he wants this question to go to Francis, but I'm sure each one of you has an opinion about it. You have brilliant questions. Each one of them should have a full webinar, actually.
Yeah.
I was going to ask a question about the traditional justice, not just in terms of mechanisms and how to marry the mechanisms, but in terms of the source of the stigma, and to have religious leaders and clergy involved in the reparative process too.
Yeah.
Not just formal
Thank you.
justice, but please,
Yeah.
would you please pick on that question? What about traditional justice, please? We know that from Rwanda, where I worked, but please tell us about your
traditional justice.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. And I love that question about traditional justice.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, yes. And one thing I want our audience to take it and bring it the perspective of the Ugandan context. Our traditional justice system creates what we call a win-win situation for
Wow.
both the victims and the perpetrators. You know, it is a win-win situation. It is a dialogue. It is a dialogue that takes over time. It is the negotiation. It is the acknowledgement of wrong from the perpetrator. It is the apology from the perpetrator. It is the compensation traditionally from the perpetrator's clan. What the world has got to know as Matuput is actually a celebrative ceremony. The end product of the traditional justice systems.
Mm-hmm.
And it connects with the restorative justice in what? In mending broken relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Traditional justice system, we've had scenarios whereby the formal justice systems, courts has ruled certain things, and people are already waiting to attack that particular clan because the courts has ruled in a favor of a perpetrator. It is totally different from the traditional justice systems. It works alongside victims and the perpetrators and create that lasting relationships, which we call a win-win situation with the ultimate goal of bringing the parties together. It's a strong traditional aspect. And I think that is what a lot of people, the negotiation that has taken over time, the compensation, the
We
apologies,
are
all this.
over time, and we will have about 8 more minutes. Then we must leave because I have another.
Okay.
One of the
Okay.
things, one of the things we spoke about at when we met first before the webinar was we have working groups at the center that meet once a month, once every 2 weeks, regularly, to ask all these kind of questions, any of it, and actually to write together about it too. So it contributes to the wisdom of others and seek the wisdom of others. So first of all, know about that option. But Jackie and I had one of the most important conversations. Remember, Jackie, about transitional justice, restorative justice, reparative justice, and I threw at her a whole bunch of documents to look at, and I promised to send it to everybody who attended at this webinar, because that will contribute to our in-depth ongoing discussions about this. And absolutely, this is not going to be the last time. Let me just read the last 2 questions so I don't, so Monica and Seema don't get disappointed. So Monica is asking, are there existing youth-led organizations or networks inside South Sudan or in the diaspora that are currently working on transitional justice? And how can the diaspora youth plug into them rather than duplicate efforts? That's a brilliant question, Monica. That's why we have in our working group, we have people from home, from the diaspora, So we keep, so the discussion does not just duplicate and we don't just keep repeating the same mistakes also. And I will read the last question, and please, each one of you who wants to respond to those two. From Seema, thank you to the speakers for shedding light on this topic. My question concerns the rebuilding of social ties. That's another key webinar. I would like to know more about your experience regarding this aspect of restorative justice. It is true, that is restorative justice. Thank you, Seema. Reconciliation and the rebuilding of social ties. How have you dealt with those who hold power and refuse to acknowledge the trauma they have caused? My God, that's 10 more webinars. So each one of you who asks these crucially important questions have to write to me. You have my email in the chat, and we plan webinars on each one of these questions, at least webinars. And we can also start working groups. But I wonder if Malala or Jackie or Amania or Francis want to answer briefly to those. We have 5 more minutes.
I think that's an important question. And I think
each one is
Francis could speak much more onto that with their interaction with Uganda government. Yes. On acknowledgement of the atrocities committed in northern Uganda. But of course, speaking also from South Sudan perspective, it is a very difficult question to answer because at the end of the day, the denial aspect is always there. It is political denial, it is denial of facts, it is denial of evidence, it is a denial of everything. Even sometimes survivors themselves will be the one to speak about their experience, and just in front of them that it is told to them that it didn't happen. That's completely rubbish. That they will call it all kind of sort of names, okay? And these are things that always, as an activist or as a human rights defenders, is that you stand your ground. And as survivors, you stand for the truth, no matter whether this person denies it today, no matter whether they deny it because they're in power. The truth must be told. It must remain as it is. And of course, accountability never ends with the government or in power. It continues with whoever comes, so long as the truth is kept alive. And that is something that always we speak to survivors. Never let your truth die. Let that truth remain. No matter, your truth is your truth. It's never any person's truth. It is never government official truth. It's never Amanya's truth. It is your truth. And that truth must remain with you. And you must speak about it proudly that this is the truth. And this is what I know happened to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, David. I thank you, Amanya. As you said, I'll just summarize in less than a minute.
Thank you. 2 minutes.
1 minute. I'll do less than a minute, 30 seconds.
I know you have a lot to say.
Yes, it's an interesting thing that we've been battling with for quite some time. One thing that I say, the truth should always be documented. And we've tried to document both sides of the story of the conflict. And we did this. And through our documentations, we've had certain incidents where people who hold power have confessed that we actually carried out this massacre based on miscommunication. And this has actually helped victims in some places because that apology, it's on record one time that the president of Uganda apologized for a massacre in one particular place as he was capturing power by his forces. And that apology has helped a lot of victims heal. So the truth must be told, but it's very challenging. Very difficult. You saw the Ugandan situation at the ICC alongside the president. How can the truth, they feel we are not the perpetrators. The perpetrators are the LRA, so we are okay. So these are some of the things but as we carry out our testimonies, documenting testimonies, oral history, we're able to get this truth out, and this truth will help victims in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. But let's not forget that sometimes when the truth is shared, the person needs a hug or needs support. It needs to have the truth confirmed. And so our task is amazingly complex, but we are here for it. Let me just say immediately, in addition to receiving the recording of this webinar, you will receive the flyer for our upcoming webinar for observing the 12th anniversary of the IC's 2014 genocide of the Yazidi people, entitled Beyond Survival, Reparative Education and Civil Society Work as Pathways to Healing, Resilience, and Community Recovery after the 2014 Yazidi genocide. Please register for the webinar and disseminate the flyer as widely as possible so we help each other around the world. So communities care for each other and receive care. And I promised the audience that we will hear this august panel's last words. So let's start from the end. For Francis, your last words today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for moderating this, and thank you to the audience. This is an interesting conversation. This is very important that we discuss on how we should help victims and survivors healed from what they went through. And of course, my last word, I would say, let's work together with victims, survivors, and then activists, where they can sit on the same table with practitioners and they can speak about what they need as victims and survivors. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We go back to Malala, please. Your last words to everybody. Please unmute. No, you have to unmute.
Thank you, ICMGLT, for organizing this day. My recommendations: let's work with survivors. Let us support them. Let them be strong. Let them talk themselves. And my last message is: believe us and stand with us. Thank you.
Amen. Jackie, I believe this is your time.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Yel, and all the participants and my fellow panelists. I think my last word is that for every country to move forward from the crisis that they went through, they must embrace transitional justice, as the experiences have shown, but above all, the aspect of compensation and repairing the damage becomes crucial. A wounded society cannot heal and therefore cannot have peace. So let's all work together to support South Sudan in gaining its peace, and also for survivors to restore their dignity.
Amen. Thank you, dear. And first and last, our friend Amanya.
First and last, indeed. Thank you so much, Dr. Yel, for this opportunity, and to your institution for having organized this. It's an honor having this conversation with you here and the audience that have attended this and the questions they throw all to us. This is a conversation that is not individual. This is a conversation that all of us must carry. I know the journey is not an easy one, it's a rough one, but it needs consistency, it needs perseverance, it needs commitment. And therefore, I call on anybody working in this area that it is not an easy journey, but work with the survivors, work with the people who are determined enough to make sure that reparative justice and other means of accountability are achieved. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And we will be in touch about how we continue. And thank you so much for your generosity, for your experience. And we care.
Thank you. Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Wish you good night for those in Africa.
Yes, absolutely. I'm coming anytime.
Yeah, good
Yes.
night for us in Africa. We're heading to bed now.
Yeah.
Oh, sleep well, and have good dreams.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye. Good night.
Bye-bye.